Assassin's Creed is a series that needs no introduction. However, I feel that Assassin's Creed 1 is probably the game that most people who have heard of the series know the least about. Whilst in most big game series, the first game is generally considered to be the beginning of both a great gameplay loop and amazing story that just barely misses the mark on perfecting either, Assassin's Creed 1 doesn't really succeed in either story or gameplay. Now, don't get me wrong, there is definitely some redeeming qualities in both departments. After all, the game did kick off a now 14 game saga, but I just feel like 80% of this game is surprisingly mediocre, with the other 20% being shockingly good. Assassin's Creed initially began development as a new Prince of Persia game, and much like that series was initially intended to be a quite linear story game. However, with the announcement of the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, the development quickly changed from a linear game to an open world where Prince of Persia's parkour would be greatly expanded upon. Sometime in early development, lead game designer Patrice Desilets, I hope I'm saying that right, would stumble across a history book on real secret societies and discover the Persian Order of Assassins and the European Knights Templar. The game would then quickly change to being about these secret societies, and thus Assassin's Creed's story was born. Assassin's Creed's story is set in two different time periods, with the main bulk of the game being set in 1191 during the Third Crusade, and what is usually dubbed the modern day story, which in this game is set in 2012. When we start the game, we are surrounded by a gamer's worst nightmare: women, and lots of them, with an outline of a white figure standing in front of us and saying some stuff that is hard to discern. We then teleport somewhere else with a bunch of faceless NPCs surrounding us and the sound of a woman and a man's voice talking to us. The man and woman talk about how they need to pull me out, which, I thought I had a strong pull-out game on my own, but anyway. This makes it clear that what we are seeing is a simulation. This is where we are introduced to our main modern day character, Desmond Miles, important side character Lucy Stillman, and modern day antagonist Warren Vidic, who both work for a company called Abstergo. Here we find out that Desmond is an ex-assassin who has been captured and imprisoned here. Vidic explains to us that the machine we are hooked up to is called an Animus. The Animus works by using Desmond's DNA to make a simulation of one of his ancient ancestors' memories, and the reason we were seeing buggy images beforehand was because it was trying to access an unstable memory. Vidic also explains that the reason they want Desmond in particular is because his employers are looking for an ancient artifact that one of his ancestors had close ties to. Lucy then explains that to be able to access the memory they want, they are going to have to start at a different, more stable memory and slowly work their way forward from there. We then enter a tutorial level where we learn the core principles of the Assassin's Creed. These principles being never hurt an innocent person, always be discreet, and never draw attention to the creed. Here is where we are introduced to our past main character, Altair, who immediately breaks the first rule of the creed and kills an innocent person. Altair is immediately scolded by a fellow assassin, but arrogantly brushes it off. A little bit later, we see the Ark of the Covenant and are introduced to the main past antagonist, Robert. Altair then arrogantly goes down to confront Robert, breaking the other two rules of the creed. After failing to kill Robert, Altair is separated from the other two assassins he's with, but instead of trying to help his brothers, he decides to flee and go back to the assassin's home base in Masyaf. Upon entering, we go and talk to the master assassin Al-Mualim and inform him that we failed to retrieve the artifact Altair was sent to recover, and the other assassins have died. Al-Mualim is pissed when hearing this revelation. Then one of the assassins from earlier walks in injured and immediately snitches on us for breaking all the tenets of the creed, and reveals that he was able to retrieve the artifact on his own. It's revealed that Robert is launching an assault on Masyaf. All you need to know here is that Robert screams and whines like the bald-headed ass baby he is. We fight off the assault and Robert fucks off, never to be seen again until the end of the game. After the assault, Al-Mualim has a public hearing with us in front of a bunch of assassins who seem to be more interested in the scenery. At this hearing, Al-Mualim is not happy about us breaking the creed and strips us of all our titles and equipment, then stabs us. The end. Just kidding, you somehow survive this, and Al-Mualim explains that he has 9 people he wants you to kill, and with each kill he will restore a rank and piece of equipment to you. Now, I was thinking about going through and explaining the entire plot in this section of the video, but throughout most of this game, literally nothing happens in both the past and modern day stories. In the past, you go assassinate a bunch of targets who are committing horrible crimes against innocents, and when you kill them, literally all of them say something along the lines of, "I know what I'm doing is bad, but it's necessary for the greater good, with every target subtly hinting that they are all under the same order despite all being in warring factions, and Altair slowly turns from an arrogant arsehole to a patient and wise person. In the present day, Vidic occasionally wakes you up, says some stuff that sounds similar to the guys you've killed in the past, hinting that he's a part of the same order. That order being the Templars, by the way. It's sometime in this really mediocre middle section of the story that Vidic also mentions the artifact they are looking for is called a Piece of Eden, and this one in particular is called the Apple of Eden, and that it can grant powers to whoever holds it. Outside of that, the entire middle of this story is filled with very repetitive story beats, with characters that are so uninteresting that I've forgotten their names, even though as of writing this, I beat the game 2 hours ago. It also doesn't help that Altair's voice actor is very subpar, just contributing to the whole mediocrity of this part of the game even more.
See your eyes before you die.
I sense you expected someone else.
What sorcery is this?
Fast forward to literally the end of the story where it becomes interesting again. Altair kills Robert, and whilst having a chat to him, he tells us Al-Mualim is also a Templar and made us kill all the other Templars so he could assume power. Altair then returns to Masyaf, where Al-Mualim is using the Apple of Eden to mind control everyone in Masyaf. We eventually kill him, and the Apple of Eden projects a map to us showing the locations of other artifacts around the world. Desmond is then pulled out of the Animus, where Vidic is talking to who I think is the CEO of Abstergo, but I'm not 100% sure, about using this map to retrieve other artifacts. After this convo, Desmond is told to get some rest when suddenly Desmond is able to use Eagle Vision, despite never having the ability before. I realise I haven't talked about what Eagle Vision is yet, but to quickly sum it up, it's an ability assassins have to allow them to see people's aura, distinguishing them from friend or foe. Using this Eagle Vision, Desmond sees writing on the wall left by a previous test subject that is invisible to the naked eye. The camera zooms into this image that looks like a prolapsed vagina, and then the game ends. Now this story is definitely interesting, and the cliffhanger leaves a lot of unanswered questions in a good way. Keep in mind, I skipped over a lot of story in my synopsis here, mainly because the entire middle part of this game doesn't really push the story forward in any meaningful way outside of Altair's character development. But even then, this development isn't really told in an interesting way where I can really praise it. I played this game for about 10.5 hours and only really talked about around 2 hours worth of the game's story, because the other 8 or so hours genuinely are that fucking boring. However, it definitely is undeniable that these 2 hours of story and the game's overall premise with the modern day and past storylines with a bit of sci-fi flair in there are special and definitely set the game apart from the average period piece stories we've all seen before. Unfortunately, the gameplay falls under many of the same issues as the story does, with 80% of it being mediocre and 20% of it being good. The main two things you're going to be doing in this game is either parkouring or fighting, with both having amazing moments and adverse shortcomings. Starting off with the parkour, whilst I will give this game some slack considering on when it came out, this AC is by far the worst offender of your character jumping somewhere you weren't trying to go, getting accidentally stuck repeating the same move over and over again, or your character straight up refusing to climb despite the nearest grabbable ledge clearly being within reach. I know a few of the other AC games have these issues with parkour, but my god is it bad here. And unlike future AC games, it is very rare to feel like your parkour is actually flowing smoothly throughout the world. Combat also suffers from many shortcomings, with it feeling just as clunky as the parkour, with combat encounters with lots of enemies devolving to you waiting for counter-attack opportunities, as attacking in this game just feels super clunky to do. But credit where credit is due, the counter-attacks are very flashy with surprisingly smooth animations and cinematic camera angles. But if you think sword combat is clunky, it's nothing compared to the unarmed combat. Where sword combat can still be engaging despite its shortcomings, unarmed combat makes me want to gouge my eyes out. On top of all this, the game's suspicion level system seems to be all over the place, with guards sometimes seemingly trying to kill you for running too fast through the streets, but at other times they will see you climbing up walls like a medieval Spider-Man and not give two shits. But by far the worst offender that contributes to this game's mediocrity is the incredibly repetitive mission structure. How each mission works is after you talk to Al-Mualim, he sends you to one of 3 cities to kill a man. You go to that city's assassin bureau where you will then begin what the game calls an investigation. investigation on where you can kill your target. These investigation sections consist of the same repeated 5 or 6 missions, but thankfully you only need to do 3 to unlock the assassination. The actual assassinations are by far the most fun missions, however like the rest of the game they basically play the same each time with very minimal changes, rinse and repeat for 10 hours, and that is all the missions for AC1. Side objectives like doing the game's iconic viewpoints or saving citizens are again just very repetitive and, to be honest, not really worth doing outside of to find where the main investigations are on the map. And whilst we're on the subject of mind-numbingly repetitive things, the 3 cities you travel to, being Jerusalem, Damas and Acre, all feel the same to explore outside of a colour palette change. So yeah, a lot of this game's gameplay is very clunky and repetitive, but like I said earlier, the flashiness of the sword combat and the parkour when it decides to work properly is that 20% of the game that really stands out to you, with that other 80% feeling like headache-inducing busy work. Anyway, to sum up this video, Assassin's Creed 1 is mostly an average experience, with a story that meanders into nothing for most of the game and gameplay which leaves a lot to be desired. However, there is a small portion of this game that definitely is special and elevates this game from being a very mid 5 out of 10 game to a 6 or 7 out of 10. Oh fuck, I'm so sorry, I did the stupid meme without realizing, fuck's sake. But you know what? This was in a time where Ubisoft weren't the absolute clowns of the gaming industry they are now, and would come back with a second installment to the series that many people consider to be one of the best AC games ever, only second to Black Flag. But anyway, that's a story for another time. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I will be playing through all the mainline AC games, so stay tuned for those videos. Bye.